Welcome back to the More Life Podcast, and on episode 11 we have Geo in again, talking about some more mad shit, everything from the pyramids to the war on drugs to 9/11 to fucking DMT, mushrooms, the lot. Get your popcorn ready, cunts. Enjoy the episode. So we are back with another podcast with the main man, Geo. Time to pick his brains for another couple of hours. Fucking excited. We're just going to get straight into it. We're going to get right into the fucking deep shit. So, pyramids to start with. I feel like it's something that is just fucking mind-boggling. I saw a measurement actually recently, and it was, if you times the height of the Great Pyramid by 43,200, you get the circumference of the Earth. And then if you times the base perimeter of it by the same number, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. What the fuck is that? What's going on? Geo.
Well... You've heard of Randall Carlson. He does a great job of explaining the sacred geometry or the hidden mathematics that is within the pyramid. Now, if you take, say, for instance, the sacred geometry in itself would be powerful, and if you take in the ability to do that mathematics in itself is powerful, and then you combine it into a building that apparently was built by chicken bones and slaves on ramps, you just go...
Doesn't add up.
I remember anyone that's done a morsel of construction work will understand this. So my friend's he's got his own joinery business, and he sent me a picture from inside the pyramid, and it was a wall. So there's the stone roof, and then there's a wall straight ahead, and then to 90-degree angle is the adjacent wall. So what was really strange about this is that if you get, say, for instance, grains of wood or grains of stone, they have a sort of vein or a pattern that's through them. And this wall was perfectly lined up with this wall, with the exact grain running through it at a 90-degree angle. Now, you could go to a quarry and cut that all day long, and you'd be really pleased if you could get a 1 meter squared piece next to a 1 meter squared piece. Never mind a 10, 20, 30 ton square lying next to another 30 ton square, and putting it in such a position that there's not a gap. So we use things like mortar and grout to fill in gaps.
Yep.
You couldn't fit a business card in the gap between the stone.
Just brick to brick.
Solid. And the thing that the pyramids tell us is that the geometry or the hidden geometry that was in there, what does it tell us about how, like, what they knew? So it's a way of having this documented history within a building that will last the test of time to show that they were aware of it. So just things like the Age of Leo was the constellation that was in line with when the pyramids were built. So if you look at things like the chambers and the pyramids, it points to that time. But that time was, I think, 10,900 years ago, which falls foul of... It was built 2,500 BC.
Yep.
And then you look at some of the other instances that are there, and you go, well, if it wasn't built then what else is there around that we can kind of verify that? How can we work out if it was actually built by the sort of narrative that we believe or we've been told?
Yep.
Or does it point to this Age of Leo constellation, along with this sacred geometry, along with this, hidden mathematics, and along with this sort of bizarre and unusual way of constructing such an amazing sort of building that we can't really say it was done by chicken bones and ramps. So you look at it and you think, well, the Sphinx is probably a good one. So the Sphinx is in the Giza Plateau, and when you look at the Sphinx has been remodeled a few times, so it's pretty difficult to date the Sphinx.
What is the Sphinx?
So the Sphinx is a lion's body that is the human head. That sits, you see the sort of lion shape that sits there. Now that fits with the Age of Leo because the constellation of Leo is the lion. So the lion sitting resting matches the time period or the constellation period that is for the much older timeline for when the pyramids would have been built. And you go, well, it's a bit unusual. But geologists were able to look at the boundary walls. So there's been lots and lots of sand that has went in there over time, and as they've excavated the sand out, they've seen the boundary walls. The boundary walls have water erosion where there's been floods that have eroded the walls, and you can measure how much water and how long ago it was done. Guess when it was done.
Fuck yeah, hundreds of thousands maybe.
Well, it was
Tens
a good
of
guess. It matches in line with the pyramids being much older than the mainstream media. So they place it 8,000 to 9,000 years ago.
8 to 9.
And it just, well, if you think back, it's 2,500 BC's the narrative, and we're in, give or take 2,000, so it's 4,500 years ago it was said that the pyramids were built. Okay. But it looks like it's much, much older than that, based on the Sphinx, the water erosion, the constellation for where everything would have lined up in the King's Chamber, pointing out at the constellation. You can go back and you can measure when in the star constellation when that would have lined up, and that would have been at the age of Leo. So everything points to the age of Leo, and you've got the Sphinx itself, which is a lion, which is in the astrological calendar. The astronomical calendar is the lion.
Yep.
So you go, well, things are pointing more towards a different time period. But Randall Carlson goes on to explain that they were able to, and this is what's really mind blowing, is how did they know the circumference of the Earth?
I know.
How did they know the equatorial distance of the Earth? And how were they able to build that with such precision into a building like this? And it's what the only thing that we can really deduce from that is things are much more mysterious than what we're being told. Which personally, my own point of view, I quite like. I've always thought there was more out there. Yeah. When you've been told something, someone ever said something to you and you go, you ever had something like that?
100% more to that. See, there'll be people watching this. When you're talking about the circumference of the Earth, what's the relevance in that? Like, why did you say? The measurements of the pyramid, the Great Pyramid. 43,000, like, is that a 200? It's just a specific number that they were able to multiply and get the exact number.
And 43,200 has significance in that in the cosmic rotation through the solar system, that cycle goes through a cosmic period, and I'll need to look up the numbers, but it's something like 21,200, and if you double it, this gives you the number to divide everything by. So there's relevance in terms of, I can't remember what it's called. Look it up.
Look it up, Jamie.
Brought the laptop. We need to get a Jamie.
We've got an Aaron, bro. We've got an Aaron coming soon. But see what I was watching Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock on a podcast. I actually sent you, Geo, to ask if you'd watched it. Obviously you had. And they were talking about the quarries that they got the stones from was like miles and miles away from the actual pyramid site. So what is the traditional belief of like how the pyramids were made? What are we being told? How are the pyramids
well, the story goes, if you look at what mainstream media say, or not mainstream media, but the sciences, but the history that's been taught, what they said is that the quarry's 600 kilometres away. They've cut the rocks, and then they floated them down the Nile, and then popped them off, and then rolled them up a little ramp, and then placed them in place to the tune of, I don't know, it's 2,600,000 tons of this huge sort of limestone, and
the rock's not huge though. They're not 20 tons. The squares.
There's three blocks that sit above the King's Chamber that are 90 tons each.
90, so they float. Apparently, they floated down a river, or like an owl, like a water.
Do you know the old expression? Like, do you think I came down the Clyde in a banana boat? That's what comes to mind when I hear that, because they've tried to recreate this. They've tried to recreate, float. There's an ancient site in Polynesia, and there's it's a slight tangent here. There's a lattice structure of an ancient civilization that has built this, and the mythical story is that a flying god, they depending on the translation, it's either a dragon or a bird, but they had taken the volcanic rock and positioned it in the lattice form to create this city. And they're at a loss to go and figure out how they moved these blocks that are 50 to 100 tons in length, and they're like, there's no way. And they said, oh yeah, they floated it down. And given the fact that it came from the top of the volcano, let's put aside that they've got it to ground level, and then they floated it from where the volcano base is over to here. Well, they've tried it with 1 and 2 ton blocks using sort of bamboo strapped together to see if they can float it. The thing just sinks. And the other thing that is really, really strange about it is it's magnetized. So all the rocks have been magnetized and are in position. But like, how have they been able to do this?
What do you mean by magnetized?
So magnetized, they have magnetic properties within them. So typically, the thing that we understand that's magnetized is iron. So our Earth's core is made of iron. Its spinning rotation creates a polarity where you have the positive and the negative. That's what we call the poles, and that comes from the spinning core. So there's a process that helps that become magnetized, and typically volcanic rock isn't magnetized. So when it comes out the earth as molten lava. It solidifies, and that's just it. There's no explanation of how this rock became magnetized, because any other rock that we find, any other basic rock, doesn't look like that. So you need to ask yourself, well, how did that happen?
So obviously the theory that because it's like how many feet tall is the Great Pyramid?
I will do my Jamie bit right now and I'll tell you.
It's obviously in Egypt, isn't it? Obviously.
Yeah.
Is
so
that
the Giza Plateau is in Egypt.
Okay.
So Egypt, depending how far back you go in history, it was called Kem. So Kem was at the time period, and it had vegetation and was tropical, and then over the evolution of time, it's got this sort of more dusty desert-like atmosphere, and it's something that's the geologists can see. They can point to it. I mean, Randall Carlson and his name Graham Hancock did a great job at explaining it. And it's when all these people are dismissed when they say, well, here's the evidence. And the thing with academia is it's like, say for instance, like if you or I are wrong, then we have like, okay, fair enough. We try and figure out what's the new development. So what, I invested in the wrong thing, right? What, where did it go wrong? What, if I was running it again, what would I do differently? If you're working with a client and something doesn't work, you try it and you go, right, okay, well, let's adapt and adjust. Right? In academia, what happens with these guys is they generally will spend their entire career pinning all their theories and hypothesis and all their credibility and reputations attached to one idea. So anything that threatens that makes all that work disappear. So they will defend it to the death, regardless of how obvious the evidence to the contrary is. And they'll use things like pseudoscience, and it's just sort of fantasy, and it's all these sorts of, derogatory explanations in the face of blatant evidence that says, look, I don't think you're considering all the facts.
Yep.
So it's one of those things that it's a difficult situation, because people that are academic usually come with some accreditations. They come with certificates or titles that show that they should be listened to. But we need to be very mindful of they do get it wrong, and they have a vested interest in keeping the story going if it matches all their lifetime of work. And that's the difference between Randall Carlson, who's a master builder. So he goes around building things and he understands construction and putting things together and how to move things into place, and mechanical advantage, which would be like, how do you move something that's massive, that's mechanically, how could you mechanically move something that's huge with very little effort or force? So things like leverage is a good one, where you can, if you use like a crane, for instance. So a crane's a great example. You see a crane, you look at this sort of long T-shaped thing that stands up, and you go, how does it lift such heavy objects? Well, it's using levers, which is the method of leverage, to pick these heavy things up. Over that distance, they using this pulley system, which gives it huge mechanical leverage. But even at that point, that's things that are, within our explanation of heavy, not 90-ton blocks suspended over a chamber a couple of 100 feet in the air. So this is where it gets a bit interesting when you start to look at the sacred sort of mathematics that's been embedded in here. Because you could argue the toss, you could say, well, was it built by slaves? Did they build a ramp? It's like, how long do you think this ramp would be?
I know.
Right? And I go cycling. I cycle up a ramp. I go up an incline that's 8, 9, 10%. I am blowing out my hole, right? Lifting my own body weight and an 8-kilogram bike up a hill. And you're telling me you are pushing a 10, 20, sometimes 90-ton cube up a fucking ramp made of sand, pushed by slaves. Is that what we're led to believe? On wooden rollers? Nah. I was born on a day, but it wasn't yesterday.
So what do you think happened to him?
The best explanation that I've heard, it goes back to, it's a funny story because the guy that said it was not the one that set off the interest on my part in terms of what was done. So I don't know if you've seen any of the ancient Tibetan monks that are able to levitate things. So they levitate things using drums and different trumpets.
Like
essentially frequency. They're using sound frequency to levitate items. And that connects to Nikola Tesla. We'll come on to him in a bit, but there was an interesting experiment that he did that matched what these Tibetan monks were doing, where they would levitate things. So there was lots of talk and chat about it, but there was a German doctor who wrote extensively about it because he was asked to visit I can't remember if it's the Grand Master or whoever the top monk was sick and unwell. So they requested the doctor come up and visit and see if they could tend to him. So the doctor had visited, and he was treating the head guy, and they were out at a cliff, and the doctor recounts what has happened when he has been putting what they've been doing with these instruments. So there was a hole in the cliff, like a cave, 200 feet in the air, and these monks starting to blow on these trumpets and create noise. This huge sort of orchestra of noises and frequencies, and the rock started to lift off the ground. And the doctor's in complete disbelief. He's like, I've never seen anything like this. And so much, so very Germanic, writing down everything's detailed, time, log, information. Now, he said that they levitated that rock from the ground up to the face of the cave, 200 feet in the air. You say, well, is that something that is unheard of? Well, no, we use like superconductors to levitate. For instance, the super bullet train in Japan, I use levitation using superconductors where it sits just above the track and moves at high speed, levitating just above the track. So it's not something that's unknown. We can levitate things. We can levitate things with sound. It just baffles us that we think that this is a new technology, and it appears anything but. Nikola Tesla was in there's a famous tale about what happened in a New York hotel. It was a fairly tall building, and he was measuring to see if he could get the resonant frequency of the building. And if you can match the frequency of something, you can affect it in such a way that you get resonance. Mm-hmm. And the easy way to see resonance is have you ever seen the tuning fork experiment? So the tuning fork experiment is where you take a tuning fork. You could have a tuning fork at 524 hertz, and you could have a tuning fork at 432. You could hit your tuning fork and put it next to that one at 524. That will not move. If you switch that tuning fork to 432 to match his 432, when you hit that tuning fork, it will resonate, and that one will start to vibrate. Mm. And that's an easy illustration of what happens. That's called resonance. So sometimes it's called sympathetic resonance, where you ever heard the expression, I don't know why, but I just feel on your wavelength.
Yeah.
That's it. Because you're resonating at the same frequency. Well, imagine doing that with things that are physical. Because one of the things that science is baffled to explain is that we have this modern model explanation that it's science explains everything. But when you get to the point where, if you take, for instance, our physical matter is made up of atoms, which is made up of electrons and protons and neutrons, all they are is energy, and they're vibrating at a certain frequency that we then call physical because we can interpret that, seeing that it's vibrating at that, and it's just a slow moving frequency that we go, oh yeah, it's solid. But when you get to the inner levels or the minute levels of how that operates or how it's constructed, you realize it's all energy. So Nikola Tesla was saying, well, look, if we can match the energy of something, we can influence it, much the same way as the bullet train or the tuning fork or these Tibetan monks. Well, he matched the resonant frequency of this building, nearly shook it to the ground. They thought there was an earthquake in New York, and it wasn't. It was Tesla trying to match the resonant frequency of the building. I'm entirely sure that was covered up. Oh, right. That was one of those, right, when he died, they took all of his work, confiscated all of his work, broke into the safe, and wouldn't let it see the light of day.
That's mad. What do you think he used? Like some sort of machine, like?
would normally be something that would create vibe. I mean,
you seen the Tibetan monks fucking using horns and shit, blown into.
Well, Nikolai Tesla's famous statement is that if you start to understand everything's energy, frequency, and vibration, you'll now start to understand the universe much better. He was a proponent of our universe as an electromagnetic universe, meaning it's made up of energy, not lots of. We see it as physical stuff, things that we can poke and touch. He's like, but when you start to see that it's made up of vibrational energy, you're getting much closer to what this thing is actually made up of. And all his experiments were things that were interacting with energy, frequency, and vibration. So how do you do that? Well, we're doing it right now with our voice boxes. We're creating a sound, which is creating a vibration, which is going through the air, which is vibrating. We're communicating. We do it all the time. But so what he'll be doing is matching that resonant frequency with something that's looking to pick that up via sound, or he's sending a sound out, just like the tuning forks. Tuning forks are a way of creating that vibrational force. So Tesla matched exactly what the Tibetan monks were doing, just in a New York skyscraper in a hotel, which wasn't really that good, because I'm sure the architects didn't account for some guy that had understood the laws of the universe and was fucking around with a resonant frequency to see if he could get match the building's sort of resonance. But bringing that back round to the pyramids, because that's where it started, is that if we look at, for instance, the pyramids, Matthias De Stefano is a guy that's got a bit of a interesting story. He believes he can remember all of his past lives, and he, interestingly, fascinatingly, or whatever superlative you want to add to it, he remembers being in Atlantis. He also remembers being in Kemp, which was what Egypt used to be called, and he remembers all the songs that they used to sing. So that some of the chambers are there to sing songs, and it matches the resonant frequency. And this whole chamber is about resonance, and the pyramids are built as a power spot for energy, which is all energy, frequency, and vibration. That's the whole purpose of it. So he says, look, it wasn't slaves that did this. He says the blocks were levitated down from the quarry. He says because they knew how to get the resonant frequency of the rock and levitate it down. They would have these instruments that would create the resonant frequency. Now, that's fantastical and sci-fi stuff to us, because we don't see that, right? We could probably get there, it'd be difficult to get there with a Tibetan monk. So what chance have we got with like levitation devices in Egypt? Well, let's argue both sides of it. Is it more likely that someone came down, quarried this with chicken bones, floated it down the Nile on a boat, then moved it up a ramp made out of sand and placed it, within millimeter perfection, lined up with the constellation at 1/20th of a degree of accuracy, with the inbuilt mathematics to work out the circumference and the equatorial distance of the Earth and its positioning in the the universe to the constellations of the stars? Or is it more likely that an ancient civilization had been here that had advanced knowledge and might have had these devices that floated them down? Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at it like that, you go, maybe it isn't that fantastic after all, because the story that we're told to believe, we look like dumb idiots when you look at all the stuff that's built within there. You go, I don't think it's quite like they say it is.
Yeah, there's no fucking way if it was humans that were alive at that point. Like, there's no way they're pushing that amount of fucking... No way. Stone. There's actually, it's impossible. There's no fucking... There would need to be how many thousand people to push the 190-ton cube up a fucking ramp? There would need to be thousands of people, surely. And they're not big enough.
Even at that, I mean, like, for instance, like, let's argue it out. Let's say you could get enough humans, right?
How many humans couldn't get enough?
Let's say you had enough. Let's say you had enough and you attached a big rope, right? You attached a big fuck off rope.
How big would they need to be, though?
And it's just stuff like, how fucking far would you need to build the ramp? Let's say you attached the rope. So you had people pulling at the front, you had people pushing at the back, and you're pushing it up this ramp. How fucking high up would you need to build this ramp? Because if you need to place it 200 feet above the King's Chamber, right, which is substantially higher up, the people that need to pull it need to be, all the way up, further up past that. Then you need to position it.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you need to position it into place. But even taking it up a ramp without scraping it. Remember, this thing is precision, like laser precision pieced together. There's no fucking danger.
No, it's not.
Like, anybody that's done any work in the house has scratched a bit of glass or or chipped a bit of wood.
Oh yeah,
It's like there's no fucking way.
I know.
There's just no way.
Doesn't
And you
make
go and
any
you look at it, you even just look at the numbers, you go, right, tell me of another fucking lullaby, because this one is not happening. Like that, this is outrageous.
It's actually
And it's like, look, see the people that, you know, I got a comment that was like, do you know these fucking woke pussies, just like, just need that cause, just needing to fucking hang their hat on anything. Anyway, some guy that thought he was fucking Egyptian was saying,
thought he was Egyptian.
he's say fucking Postle. I'm like, you're about as Egyptian as a tatty scone, my friend. And he's saying, you know, it's cultural misappropriation and racist that you're suggesting that the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids. And I'm like, I'm not suggesting that Egyptians didn't build the pyramids, just know the ones that you're fucking claiming did. I don't know what they'd have been called in Kemp or whatever they may be. And I don't know where they were from. But whoever they've done a really, really good job. Right? But they're not the guys that you thought they were. And you say to them, say, look, if you want to argue cultural appropriation, I can argue that it's false valor, that you're claiming valor for something that was brave and astonishing and courageous to build. That wasn't the fucking guys that did it.
Yeah.
You know, so there's, you need to remember there's two cheeks on an arse. Right, so you can argue one cheek, there's another cheek to argue.
See the logic behind the monks fucking, I could actually fathom the rock going up to the face of the cave, like going straight up. How do they like bring it up and push it in a direction? Like, mate, the fact that I was gonna just say, how the fuck, if we visualize, say the pyramids haven't been built, we're a bird's eye view of what the fuck's going on. There's a quarry 600 kilometers away. Like, are they running next to it with instruments? Like,
I don't know. Like the description that Matthias De Stefano said, that was like there was nodes. There was like, imagine that they had like a pathway
of nodes,
and they're putting it down. So they imagine the vibrational frequencies being sent, and it's just floating down. It's levitating off the ground. And you know, when anything's levitating, you can go like boop and push it, and it'll just, you know, you're only going against air resistance. So, you know, and this is the thing that's fascinating, because even if there was the pyramids, right, even if say the great pyramids could never have been done, there's just so many of them across the world. When you start to look at the ancient history, the ancient mysteries, you look at some of the sites that are around there, and there's one that has a monolith that's 1,700 tons, and it's a monolith, just a solid one piece of stone. You go, how? There's a famous one in China that looks like it's levitating above the ground. I'm not sure how it's positioned, but it's sitting on a waterway, and it looks like the rock is levitating. I'm sure there's something underneath it, but even at that, how did you get it on there to begin with?
I know.
And like Easter Island, you look at some of the huge rocks that are on Easter Island, and it's, you know, that's just one of many. And you start going through Machu Picchu, you look at the way that they've constructed this. Machu Picchu, they've got 3 different building styles where they've had the originals, which are huge and these unusual shapes, but they're all pieced together like a perfect jigsaw, like it was meant to be. And they're built in such a way that they can withstand earthquakes, like a really advanced techniques, not just like, Henry Hobbit and Bobby the Jobby that's put them together and went, oh, there we go. Like very, very, very thought out. Let's build this in such a way, and you can see the rocks getting smaller as the years have went on, where people have just not had the information on how to do it. They've not had the secrets passed down to them. And Machu Picchu's got 3 different levels. Now, Machu Picchu sits above 10,000 feet in altitude.
Where is that?
Machu Picchu's in Peru. So you go and see it, and you go, it's essentially a city up in a mountain, and you go, right, there's people that get altitude sickness and can't lift their own body weight. How are you lifting these stones? How are you moving them into place? And it's an entire city with irrigated walls. Like the walls are all terraced higher up, and you go, right, there's way, way more going on. I can't remember the name. I'll need to look up the name.
Because Graham Hancock talks about how he believes that we had the ability to perform telekinesis at one point. And we were so disconnected that we just fucking forgot how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you look at the height of the pyramids?
Let me check it out for you now.
But it's so fucked up as well, because if we go back to visualizing the process of this, say they had nodes to run it down to the pyramid, how the fuck did they position them on top of the other and like that pyramid formation all the way to the top so perfectly? And see all the mad, is it hieroglyphs?
So the height of the pyramid is for the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is the tallest one. It was 481 feet. It's made out of 2.6 million cubic meters of stone. That is an insane amount of material.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
It's also its base is 230 meters, and they believe, according to Wikipedia, famous truth tellers of them all, 4,624 years ago. Quite accurate. It's a very specific number. I don't know if you know this, but the pyramid's 8-sided. No. It's an 8-sided pyramid, so it's slight. I can't remember if it's concave or enclave shape. So it's got slight angles on the edge. Also, well, it's probably too much to go into one. We could do a whole fucking episode on this. We'll leave that for another time yeah, because this one's deep. Probably the one that most people will be fascinated with. It's the easiest place to start. Is Randall Carlson's Sacred Geometry or Hidden Mathematics. It's built into the pyramid.
Yeah, because
it's within 300 meters. 300 miles of accuracy. They have got the number of the equator and the circumference of the Earth within 300 miles.
It's more accurate than any scientific math equation, isn't it?
Well, you look at it and you go, I mean, even a measuring error that's so bang on
for how big the measurement is.
It's absolutely insane that they've known this stuff.
How do you think they knew it? What the fuck? How do you actually think they knew the Earth? Oh fuck, the Earth. How do you feel like they actually knew the fucking circumference of it, mate? If you actually think about it. I don't know if I'm the only cunt lost. It's gonna be, what are you talking about now? So the height times 43,200, the height of the Great Pyramid, equals the fucking circumference of the Earth, mate. The measurement, the whole Earth. Fucking retarded, mate. Who chose the fucking 43,000? That's what I'm saying. I asked this at the start. I know there's. Yeah. Geo, who chose that? I know 43,200. Why was that?
Have you watched the Hidden Geometry? Right, go and watch it. Okay. Because I will butcher how good Randall Carlson does this. Okay. He will blow your mind because he sits and explains. You remember the place After School? So After School is this series there, right? That's what to look for. Yeah. See that there? It will blow your mind. I put it on. There's no way am I watching 2 hours and 20 minutes. As I've got stuff to do. I was like, fucking cancel everything. Cancel everything. Well, I'm not leaving.
So he touches the 43,200 in that video.
The 43,200. Right. From memory, I need to double check this. So don't hold me to this. There is a precessional cycle that our solar system goes through within the universe. Right, and it explains some of the cataclysms because imagine that here's the easy way to think of it. Our Earth goes through the solar system around the sun, right? So, and our moon goes round the Earth. So the position that we're in moves relative to what part of the year we're in.
Yeah.
Well, imagine that the sun and the solar system has its own movement, and that movement is connected to the number of the 43,200. Oh, okay. I believe it's called the precessional cycle. Again, don't quote me on that. I'm sure I'm hurting the feelings of some fact checker. But there is a movement through the universe that we like. The solar system's year, if you like.
Yeah. Okay. So there's relevance to that.
And there's that. That what is mind blowing is we know what that is now. We can't answer how they knew it then.
Yeah, that's fucked.
And we're like, how the fuck did they know it? How did they know?
No.
And it's so accurate, and it's like, don't know if you want to get into this. This is fucking heavy lift. This is a heavy lift.
Go on.
Right. So the ancient Egyptians had a god, and the god was called Horus, the god of sun, light. So Horus started the day, and he made the 12 steps of enlightenment. When he got to the 6th, that was the time where he taught everyone above. That was the initiates of the light, and he was the God teaching them how he wanted the best for people and the energy and everything to be given to them.
Yep.
Right, and he was provide the light and the energy and the wisdom for them. Right, but when Horus had went down to the steps, he was finished, and it was you were then to exist through the Prince of Darkness, which was Set at sunset. So Set was darkness, and in darkness you had to survive through the 12 steps of darkness before Horus would return, and then there would be the 12 steps again. Horus, if you switch the R and the S, is hours, and the 12 steps is the 12 hours of daylight. And the Prince of Darkness, it's Set at sunset, is the 12 hours of night, and that's where we get our time from the ancient Egyptians. But that mathematics came from how they knew of the constellation and the astronomical movement and the position of our Earth, and where all this stuff came from, and it was teaching the wisdom through that. And if you take, for instance, Horus, which is light, and that light was going across the sky, that's where you get the story of Luke Skywalker making his way across the sky, and he met the Prince of Darkness, which is Darth Vader, and that's the whole story of Star Wars. And it comes back, it goes all the way back to ancient times, ancient history, and all the ancient wisdom. Like the veins in it are everywhere.
Yes.
And you look and you go, there's way more going on.
But see how we know stuff now, right? Is it not quite naive to think that we're the most advanced people that have been alive? Like, is that because we look back and think they knew less than we did, but what if they just didn't? They knew more than we did. Is that not just the obvious kind of reason why they've done all this?
Well, the easy way to think of it is we done 50 push-ups each before we started.
That's why
and when you came out at the 50th push-up, when you stood up, you felt like Mr. Olympia. You were the greatest ever. That was the feeling, right? And that is what we're like as a civilization. We feel like we're king shit. Yeah. And then we look around and we're going, I don't think we're as good as we thought we were.
So that's
because
what it is.
It's what it's like. We're just like in our own moment.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, and this gets back to what we discussed in the last episode, which is why would you hide knowledge? Why are you keeping information from us? Is like, well, because if you want to portray yourself as, like, if you wanted to portray yourself as the biggest guy in the world, well, you wouldn't let anybody see anybody bigger than you. Right, so you would keep it secret, right? It's the same sort of thing. Yeah. Well, you know, that's just an easy way to explain what it's like. So you don't want to let out any knowledge or any wisdom that makes you look less of what you are.
Yep.
So things like the ancient pyramids, can we levitate things? What was Tesla up to? Why? How did they know this stuff? Well, that flies in the face of this huge timeline of history that we've been told. You look at the entire. Think for a minute. How many professors there are that have studied Egypt? How many historians? How much excursions and all this? Think of all of them connected to that. Do you think that they want that information to come out, that the Sphinx water erosion tells you that their story's not quite right? Yeah, no. Or that their 30 years of academia was based on a falsehood? That there's new information that defies that? If you were in their shoes, what would you do?
Well, you think about what... If I was in their shoes, I'd probably drop my ego and fucking be open to new ideas, but I know what you mean. Like, most people wouldn't.
Would guess what's happened to the people, because there has been brave people that have done that. Guess what's happened to them?
Dead.
Ostracised, cast out,
so not
excommunicado, slandered, character assassinated.
Mad.
Like, and if you imagine that you're a professor in the uni, like, even just look at like COVID, like doctors that came out, Dr. Malik, Dr. Peter McCulloch, Nassim Malhotra, they all came out and went, this is a mistake. Well, there's your paycheck gone.
Yeah, legit.
It's like these people that are in academia, it's like their way of life and way of earning is directly linked to the people that want to keep that story going. Yep. And if you defy the story, then you're gonna get pushed on the butt of the hot spots. So it's easy for us to say that.
Yeah.
But when you go and you say, right, look, everything I've worked for in my life is now at threat. So I go back. I can't work in the industry that would pay me for everything I've worked for. So when we're going to go, we'll go and fucking work in Aldi or Lidl or, you know, tell them I've done all this studying, paid all this money, went through all this education to get here to then, you know, it's a big ask for them. Like, arguing both sides of it, it's a tall order for them. Like, it's easy for us to say, like, I just say it. But I think when you're in there, it's
your emotion, your ego, your whole life's attached to it. It's fucking hard to just say it's all fucking bullshit.
It's the whole hero's tale. Like, are you prepared to fall on your sword for what you believe in?
Yeah.
Are you prepared to do it? And a lot of people can't get there.
See the fucking ancient hieroglyphics, the writing. What relevance do you know of that? Have they been able to fucking decipher anything on them? Because I saw someone flying over the pyramids. I think he was on like the mad seated fucking parachute thing, and it slows down just above and you see above the pyramids, and every fucking stone is covered in the writing, like every single one.
What do you think they are?
I think I don't even fucking I think there's maybe like some sort of like timestamps from like people that done it. I don't actually fucking know. It's crazy.
Let me find you this link.
Because how long do you think about a construction that's like as big as that? Like how long would that take? Like teams of construction workers to build? Like, do you think the building the Great Pyramids took years?
Well, the story that the Great Pyramids took a couple of 100 years to build, but it's like, yeah, but it's like
just whip up in a day with a levitation.
If you're starting with you're not even getting the right people that built it. I mean, like, you're already at a loose footing.
Yeah, okay. Well, do you like probably like because if they do the levitation thing, where are they getting cubes from though? They're from a quarry. What, just big fuck off? They're breaking them off. Cubes? No, big lands of rock, and they're breaking up into perfect cubes and fucking taking it 600 kilometers away. Off with? I know. Tools or it's so fucked. See, what I was going to make a point there, right? The kind of history that we were all shown in school is like 100 years ago. You're shitting in grounds. You've got like horse and carriages. You've not get cars and stuff. But the part of that history that we don't get shown is they had electric cars in fucking like early fucking 20th century. So all we all think as normal people is the further you go back in time, the less technology they have. We're all trained to think that they were stupid. They shat in fucking holes in the floor. Now they've got nice toilets that clean your ass for you. So it's I think the first step in us even talking about this is accepting that there probably was more advanced versions of us back then. Because if you don't even accept that, you can't even have this fucking conversation about levitation.
I mean, one of the things that I'll look for that link in a minute, because it's fascinating. You say, well, how much of history is true?
So do they only show us what they want us to think in terms of we were shitting in grounds, we had horse and carriage, we didn't, because there was an electric fucking, was it the wheel over the head, like in the fucking 19, they were like black and white film of them fucking driving about in electric
Even you go back to like even before then, this one will blow your mind, like Leonardo da Vinci, which I think he was like 15th century maybe, and he had a gyroscopic design for a helicopter. And you go, it's fucking outrageous. It looked like a gyroscopic design of a helicopter. We looked at it and go, that's, if you went, what's that? You'd be like, it's a helicopter. And it's fascinating to see, and you go, well, how much of history, like I remember hearing about Tartaria. Tartaria is like a civilization that was wiped off history books. Can't find anything about them. And I remember doing a discussion about, like, I bought the book, and you know when you just start to, there's a great book written by Fergus O'Connor Greenwood. It's called 180 Degrees. And Fergus's book would be it is like that, right? In terms of, I got the hardback. I spoke to him. I says, look, I'd love to get a copy. He was kind enough to send me a signed copy of the book. It came through, and I thought, how many fucking books has he sent? It was the one book.
It's fucked.
And his book is called 180 Degrees, and it says, right, everything that you've been told, imagine the inverse of that, and that's likely what's true.
It's crazy.
And he goes through every single thing. And I remember, like, I'll give you an example. Like, my sister struggles with the whole, it can't be like this, that sort of stuff. So I started reading a chapter of Fergus's book, and ended up 14 chapters in. I was only planning to read one. Left the book. Interestingly, I used a £100 note, an old £100 note as the bookmark. because it does two things. First of all, it reminds me what page I'm on. Second, I'll not be too quick and fucking leaving the book somewhere. Right, and the interesting thing about my sister is that she was in watching the kids being nipped out. First thing she says when she came back was, "What is that book?" She says, "Well, what is it?" She says, "I just read the bit about the Twin Towers." She's like, "It can't be like that." I was like, "What did you think?" She's like, "It's scary." And the only thing I could think about was, where's my £100?
She was not there.
No, it was still there, which was even more miraculous than she was looking at the book.
So it's that whole bury your head in the sand thing. Obviously, you're going to talk, but it is literally that. When people are exposed to that, it's bury your head in the sand, shit themselves, don't listen to it, or do what we're doing. George Bush was involved in it.
Aye.
20 hours.
Aye.
Are we digging into that? I will dig into whatever the fuck we want, man. Get fucking towers. Nah.
How many towers fell in 9/11?
Like 7, no? 7? No,
What?
like 7 buildings. Was there not like 7 buildings? That fucking.
So how many towers?
What do you mean by towers? 2. Yeah, but was there not like another? Was there not a third one? I can't remember. Was it a third one like just off? You see it. It was like just off the. Blew up and fell down. No, 2 big Twin Towers, and there was like one like close by.
Building 7 was reported to have fallen 54 minutes before it actually fell by the BBC. Building 7, despite being hit by nothing, fell in its own footprint in 7 seconds.
Is that not the one I'm talking about?
49 floors gone.
Yeah, so not 7 buildings. Building 7
hadn't been hit by anything.
Controlled demolition. Building 7.
Right.
Does that not mean it's the 7th building?
I knew what you meant. You were in the
No, but it's not 7 buildings, mate. Well, how many was it? 3.
There was the Twin Towers is obviously people are pointing to. It was 2 towers that had fell, and if you ask people how many towers had fell that day, they'll say 2.
Yeah.
But in reality, there was 3 towers that fell because there was World Trade Center 1 and 2, and then there was Building 7.
Oh, that's the one I'm talking
Building
about.
7 was
demolition.
Like they shown it to, like even things like if you look at the bank angle and speed of that aeroplane that hit World Trade Center. So the plane that flew into the World Trade Center was I think it was a Boeing 757 or a 767. I need to double check, but it was
757. I remember.
It was, so the plane that was supposed to have flew into the building, they can take the radar and work out the speed that it hit the building at.
Yeah.
Right. It's the bank angle and speed and drop that plane, the maneuver that plane would have had to make to do that was outside the bounds and limits of what that plane that they said hit the building was capable of.
Mm.
So much so that a Boeing engineer was asked, is it impossible? The plane would have ripped itself apart. There's a famous experiment where they take to understand the World Trade Center's construction, it's got a solid core in the center of it. Think of like the elevator shafts and how the construction is, and essentially imagine that being like the building's spine. And then it was constructed in such a way that it could take movement, and it could even be hit by an aircraft and it would still survive. When you look at the building and how it was hit, what you've got to ask yourself is, would that impact cause a serious collision and to cause a catastrophic failure? And if you look at something that's similar to it, there's a concrete block in the American desert, and they run a Phantom F4 jet at this block at 500 miles an hour to see what that would do to that block. Right? That F4 jet looked like a Coke can had been shot at a fucking brick wall. The wall was relatively untouched, and this just huge amalgamation of metallic parts just went whoosh, like that.
Mad.
And then you look at the building temperature, you look at the melting point of steel, and you look at how this whole narrative about how it was done. How many buildings? Do you know how many buildings have been on fire that have been fire insulated? How many skyscrapers have been on fire that have collapsed?
None. Yeah. It logically doesn't make sense. That
there's been 106 fires in buildings. There was one that raged for 6 days. It routed out the floors. The building stood. It was structurally sound. They just had to rebuild the floors. They had to rebuild the internals.
Yeah. Because the actual size of the plane. The
entire structure was completely fine. It's fire insulated, and it was built after the 30s. They had all these factors built in. There's 106 instances of fires in buildings, much more severe than the World Trade Centers, None of them collapsed. None of them even had structural failure.
So it hit one building. How did they say the other one fell as well?
They say there was two planes on video that had crashed into the buildings. So one plane went into one, another plane went into the other.
They did. Like the size of the fucking plane compared to you see it just puncture the side of the huge building, and then the way it drops down like straight, it doesn't really like topple up. Do you know what I mean?
Another the other interesting things about 9/11 was that there was the use of thermite. So there was traces of super thermite, which is a military grade weapon to burn through steel. It can supply its own oxygen, burn in water without requiring any additional oxygen. And it's used to basically cut through steel like butter. Super thermite is very difficult to put out because it's got its own fuel source. Yep. So it doesn't require, it's very, very difficult to extinguish. So at the base of 9/11 in Twin Towers, there was fires raging for 3 months that took 3 months to put out. All the metal that and steel and structure was put on barges and shipped to China for scrap. Why would you want to ship it to China? All the evidence was shipped away. And you look at, like, there's 7,000 architects, engineers and structural engineers that said there is no feasible way on any of the explanation of the mainstream report that could have ever happened. There is no way ever that could have happened. It's like someone coming to you and you're an expert in your field and you know that they're talking fucking pish, but these people have created a huge report to back up their pish and they say US government on it.
Yeah, so it's like don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining.
With the fucking government worldwide level. And you need to remember that what was like, Putin was interviewed by Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, I'm not watching that yet.
Putin says, who's got what to gain? Like Putin's a fucking thug, right? Let's not say that he's whiter than white. He's a fucking thug, right? But one thing Putin isn't is silly, right? He's not someone that's fucking thick. And he says, who's got what to gain out of blowing up Nord Stream? That was the conversation. And the conversation was who gains out of Nord Stream pipeline being seized? Not Russia, because their supplies cut off, they can't sell it to anyone. Well, the West gains because now they can supply light natural gas to Europe at hugely inflated prices. Brackets, not an energy crisis that we created. It's not an energy crisis, right? We didn't make 10 times our annual profits because of a crisis that we created. Russia didn't get any benefit of that. They were locked out of the SWIFT system. They were targeted. I'm not a Russian super fan by any matter of means. I'm just looking at the facts.
It's logical, yeah.
Yep. And there's a reporter in the United States, Seymour Hersh, that says, look, they've got the tracking for the radar. The Danish special forces were there hovering around the area. This is an inside job. 9/11 looks very much like that.
So say it was an inside job, fucking George Bush was behind it. Like, why do you feel? Because that was there data or files in the Twin Towers that they wanted to just erase, or was it like a political move that they could then blame Bin Laden and go and attack Iraq and all these?
You're really good at answering the right questions.
What?
You're really good at asking the right questions. Well, all the FBI's records were in World Trade Center 7, so Building 7.
Okay.
So there was a huge treasure trove of information that didn't see the light of day, just miraculously incinerated in a building that wasn't hit, that a fire that wasn't created, honest engine.
How far away was that from the Twin Towers?
You can see it on the map. It's like, it's not even, like, you'd be lucky if the World Trade Center's debris could have hit Building 7.
Right.
It wasn't even the vicinity. It was sort of like three, 4 buildings away.
Mad how that's never really covered, is it? How did they say that fell? Was that a
said there was a fire. Bearing in mind it's a fire insulated building. So when you're in a fire insulated building, what you do is you insulate the building from fire. Means that the fire will not affect the building structure. That's why there's 106 instances of buildings that have been fire insulated that don't fall.
Yeah, because
the heat, the materials that they use to build these buildings supersede any conceivable temperature that a fire could burn at for normal reasons, even a plane hitting it. So fuel and everything. They say that the most indestructible thing is actually a passport from a hijacked jet that lands at the fucking Twin Towers, because it's the only thing that seemed to fucking survive. Not the evidence, not the thermite, not the steel, not the fucking plane. But, you know, we found the passport on the ground from one of the hijackers that had fucking mutilated into a building at 550 mile an hour. And you literally go like, how crazy do you need to be? But see, what happens is, right, people's emotions are so high. It's a travesty and it's this and it's that. They're not logically thinking. So see if you go, hey, look, what's this? They just see it as an attack on these poor people that have died. And you go, no, this doesn't make sense. But it's so easy to jump on the slander. Like, this is what happens with people. They say that pioneers are the first ones to get arrows in their back. So you can be right. But, you know, they don't shoot the messenger. Messenger always gets shot whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And it's just a classic example of it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But the Twin Towers is like, and that was one of the things, like, who gains out of it? Remember what happened, because you asked why did they do it? That was the premise for the war, the war on terror. So why they went into Afghanistan and they went into Iraq was on the basis that these terrorists were now impacting. It's classic false flag. Like,
the same as World War II as well. They used that as an excuse as well. Like, I think, was it not Germany? They declared anyone comes into these waters, we'll shoot them down without asking who it is. And then America sends a fucking ship down. It gets shot down, and that's what sparked the war. Some shit like that. No,
I think you're talking about Lusitania. So the Lusitania was a ship that was allowed to go into the waters where there was known wolf pack, so the German U-boats.
Right, yeah.
So they'd sent the Lusitania unprotected into these waters that had American civilians, I think possibly soldiers on it. I'll need to double check. But the Lusitania was essentially sent there to be sunk so they could drag the Americans into the war.
Do you know what I mean? It's like all of it. It's just all like such a big political game.
If you want public backing for a war, you need the public to get behind it. Best way to do it is go and cause them emotional pain.
Exactly.
And then they'll overlook a fucking passport that's indestructible and super thermite that's burning in the bottom of a fucking building, because they're the ones that done it. Go and get them. We'll go and get them for you. You know, and then you can just frog march your agenda. Bear in mind, we're above and they're puppeting the pantomime show below. Yeah. He's behind you. There, don't look at what we're doing here.
Yeah. So 9/11 was an inside job, and the pyramids, the story you've heard, is fucking bullshit. See, when we're talking about wars though, right? Yeah. We should probably speak for the next hour. Before you make a class point, it's mad how it all links back to the self-development we push of not letting your emotion override logic and like all these things, because it's what they do to like the mass population that are just emotionally fucking controlled. Yeah. They just use people's emotions against them to then get what they want. And like, you can learn how to use your emotions or control your emotions, and it's likely that you won't be fucking controlled by the media. Yeah. No, but another thing that we were going to speak about today was like mushrooms, about how to retrain your brain, all the neurons and all that stuff, right? But firstly, I think I want to speak about like the war on drugs and how they conclude the pyramids first. We've not concluded it. Not really. Yeah, we fucking have. Not?
I reckon we come back to the pyramids, because I think, see, when you watch Sacred Geometry, right, we're going to go and compare notes, because this is once like everyone out there, go and watch this. Put it in the show notes. Sacred Geometry by Randall Carlson on After School. Go watch it.
We'll put links in the description of this podcast. That'll pop up on the screen as well.
Because we can go balls deep on this.
Yeah. The war on drugs, though, CIA, like the biggest drug dealers in the world. I think that's a good one to go into before we're speaking about mushrooms, because
why don't we see where that started? Because before the war on drugs, the war on drugs actually was the precursor to the war on drugs was a situation that evolved after World War II. So what you need to put yourself in a position is what was going on in World War II. So in World War II, the Nazis had been defeated, and there was an ideology battle. That ideological battle was between the communist way of living and the capitalist way of living. So in the West was more a capitalist structure, and in the East and behind the Iron Curtain was more of a communist structure. And there was an ideological battle in which way should the world operate. So there was polarity, because in communists they believe that everyone is created equal, the state should look after everyone, and you're heavily dependent on the state. and we should all all be comrades. Capitalism is more a case of, well, everyone gets fair opportunity, and it's an if you are better, then you're better rewarded. So if you can work harder or come up with something better, that manifests itself in a higher reward, and it separates people out because they aren't all equal. That ideological battle was going on. So after the war, there was a guy called Wasson, I'll get his first name, and he, after the war, visited a shaman in Mexico. I think I know his name, but I'm gonna check just so I don't butcher it.
Shaman is what? Is that like a temple or like a? What is that? Yeah, what's a shaman again?
Okay, the shaman is a practitioner of spiritual teachings or medicine. Robert Gordon Wasson, an American author and vice president of J.P. Morgan of Public Relations, he went down to Mexico and he visited Maria Sabina. She was a shaman in a Mexican village, and this was the first publicised, if we're going to trust that history is accurate. I think we've covered off that it's not as accurate as they would like to think. But Wasson went down there and he met Maria, and he came across this, what would you call it? This ceremony using mushrooms. And Maria's point of view was that she was the shaman and the healer. So people would come to her with illnesses and she would use these mushrooms to heal them and make them better. And it was sacred and spiritual, and the mushrooms gave the knowledge and wisdom as to how you can heal and how you can make yourself better. And you would ask the gods for healing, and there was this interaction between us in the physical plane and the higher spiritual realms. So Wasson was blown away and taking part in one of these ceremonies, and he asked, can I be involved in one of them? So Maria had said to him, like, no pictures, but you can document what we're doing. So when Wasson returned, his mind was completely blown with this mystical, magical experience that he's had down there and what he's witnessed when he's been there. So bear in mind, it's after World War II, there's this ideological battle called the Cold War that's taking place. There's this sort of friction between, are we going to fucking nuclear Armageddon? Wasson's came back and be like, there's this really fucking deeply spiritual and mystical thing that I've experienced. So much so he ends up in Time magazine explaining this huge experience that he's had with these mystical mushrooms. So it gets blown all over the press, and we enter the summer of love. Everyone is again feeling great. Into the 60s, people are feeling, optimistic and happy, and everything's love because they're LSD and magic mushrooms are on the scene. This thing's great. But guess what's going on in the background? The US neocons, the ones that always like the war machine, the military industrial complex. We need another war, boys. Where are we going to go? Fucking Vietnam's looking good. When this plays into off the back of the Korean War, you maybe heard of the Korean War, and there's a divide between North Korea and South Korea. Yeah. Well, that was in 1954. The Korean War was, again, a proxy war between the Soviet Union, which is communist, and the United States, which was capitalist. That ended in a ceasefire where they split at the 38th parallel. Right, this is the North, this is the fucking truce line, and we are the South. North is communist and authoritative and a dictatorship, Kim Jong-un and his father and so on, and in the South was Western capitalist.
Why did they use Korea to do that, US and Russia?
Proxy wars are a way that you can go in and spread influence. Typically what happens is when you have a war that can be dangerous if the main protagonists take part in it. So for instance, if Russia or Soviet Union go directly to war with the USA, then they've both got huge arsenals, they've both got military weapons. It's a heavy fucking battle. And this is what's called a hot war. So when it goes to guns, bombs, explosives, that's a hot war. A cold war is where you start to take part in actions that are to dismantle your enemy, but not using the typical hot stuff, explosives and guns and stuff. So things that manifest itself are propaganda wars, information wars, currency wars where you try and break the other country's currency, economic wars where you try to sanction them and starve them, which is similar to what we've seen in North Korea. You ban them from oil markets or exporting their goods. Right. So you start to then manipulate and weaken your enemy, but not using the hot methods. And the Cold War was a way of doing that. But typically what happens is they will try and spread the influence of their ideology into another country. Okay. So say, for instance, Korea, you've got the Soviet Union that geographically it was a very strategic place. So United States would like to be there to put missile bases and Air Force bases and plant their guys because it's very, very close to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union aren't having any of that shit because that's on our fucking doorstep. Yeah. So they're like, no, not on our watch. So they will fund and give weapons to and support the forces at the north to prevent this sort of invasion of the south. So the easy way to think about it is like if you had an enemy and he's trying to move into the house next door to you, you're like, I'm not fucking taking that. Yep. You know, this is the sort of thing where you would say, well, we aren't doing it. It's that kind of thing, but on a country scale. Yep. And this is what happened in the Korean War. So the Korean War was this proxy war where it looked like North and South Korea were fighting each other, but in reality it was a much bigger war where the puppet masters are fighting each other for that position, influence in the area and so on.
Interesting.
Sorry if this has gone off on a tangent. This is another.
No, it's all about the summer of living and onto this.
So this is what happens is that same proxy war then ended up in the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War was the same. You've got the Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese against the Southern Vietnamese, the US and the Soviet Union. It's the same sort of thing. That's the battle that we're playing. Now, the US were trying to ramp up support. And remember, the best way to get the public behind the war is to create some fear or an attack or something that they get them emotional. You've got these people that were like, right, we're going to conscript. We need you to be Uncle Sam. We need you behind the country. We need you to do your national service. It's mandatory that young boys need to go and fight. You've got these people that are now completely opened up in their mind with psychedelics. And I'm like, no. You want me to go and put my son on the line or myself on the line? Our boys, you want to go and fight a war that we don't agree with. We have nothing against the Vietnamese. This isn't anything to do with us, and we feel quite good, and it's all about like love, coming together and love and positivity. And you want us to go and fight a battle that isn't ours, for a war that isn't ours, to fight an enemy that we don't know, and you want us to get behind it? Nah. So they targeted Timothy O'Leary, who was the Harvard professor that was promoting the use of LSD. And what was going on before this was, in the psychedelic studies, the medicine were obviously finding the power of these mushrooms because people were having unbelievable effects from the mushrooms. So people that were alcoholics or drug addicts that had all manner of mental disorders, they were getting unbelievable results using these psychedelic drugs to help reconnect them back into that sense of life. So majority of people, when they have an issue, it's escape. They're trying to escape something. They feel bad about something. There's a disconnect. So they escape to take them away from that feeling. And that escapism is usually, habitual use of drugs or sex or gambling or some action that they use to escape from it. Yeah. And it's that disconnect where they have a feeling or an event that just makes them feel like they're not part of society, or they're not worth it, or they're not worthy. But what they were seeing was the psychedelics. In an analogy, we're going, oh, here's one connect that seems that hasn't been connected. Here's the other. And go like that and plugging people back in. Mm-hmm. And these doctors are reporting these profound effects. But meanwhile, the Vietnam War and Timothy O'Leary is now really against the war. You've got these people painting the Summer of Love sort of buses, all these hippies going, look, we're not taking part in this. Well, that caused a fucking real problem for the American government. So they're like, hey, look, we're not going to stand by and be fucking dictated to by hippies. We are the fucking US government, don't you know? Right? They're not going to be having some fucking hippie on the Summer of Love. Now there's a war on drugs. So, right, everything's class 1, scheduled class 1. So these doctors are like, this is a medical boon.
What year is this?
The late 60s.
Because, see the Summer of Love, obviously, the higher-ups must have planted those drugs into the country to make everyone filled with love and all that shit? Like, did they do
Some
that?
drugs, not all of them.
So, like, see, it's LSD, fucking mushrooms, all that. How did that become such a mainstream thing if it was something they...
Well, Watson had done the Time article, so he was explaining what was happening.
Why did they let that go into the Times article?
Because he was the publicist for JP Morgan.
Right.
So he had connections to the mainstream media.
Okay.
So at the time, it was euphoric. It was after the war. The US can do no wrong. We're fucking a great superpower. Everything's amazing. The commies are bad. We're really good. We're going to the moon. We're fucking great. And Watson's like, we've had this amazing treatment, amazing experience down in Mexico. It's unintended consequences. Like, it wasn't like, hey, let's seed America with fucking magic mushrooms. Because had any of the people that had decided that, if that was the case, they fucking completely misjudged it, because there's no way that if you wanted to control a populace that you would give them fucking magic mushrooms. Yeah. Because you would be like, it's not going to work, because they're going to see through the control mechanism.
So there's lack of like kind of research done on mushrooms and shit then, probably.
No, they just didn't know. They just didn't know. And Watson's talking about this magical treatment, and then it erupted into like psychedelic tourism back in the late 50s, early 60s, where people were traveling to Mexico. Then they realised that psilocybin mushrooms grow in any temperate environment. So people are going to the cow fields and finding Liberty caps, and you know, it wasn't like, hey, look, let's import them. They were already here. Okay, yeah. People were just becoming aware of it. The LSD was something that was synthesized. That's I don't know if you want to go into that tangent of how LSD was found. A fantastic story.
Brief overview. We can stay on mushrooms.
So LSD is a synthesized lysergic. I can't remember it. It's in the tip of my tongue. The doctor, I'm sure it's Albert Hoffman. LSD-25 was created as a migraine medicine, and he was in his lab, pottering around with what this is. Well, he took 100 times the dose, and he went home from his lab on a bicycle, tripping balls, and came back and says, "Look, I don't think this thing's a migraine medicine. This is this," and he explains and recounts what happened to him on this magical bicycle trip. And this is how they found lysergic acid. There's a D in there somewhere. I'll figure it out. Well, it's on the tip of my tongue. So lysergic acid. I need to look it up.
A question I had though, if we're staying on mushrooms, because it's a little bit more, direction I wanted to go in. Because I think mushrooms are a little bit more like prescribable to people than LSD. I think LSD is like a fucking, don't know. I'm not got much knowledge on that, but Geo, if you were to articulate, when people were taking mushrooms and they were having these realizations, what the fuck was happening? Why were mushrooms making these people, if you could articulate it in the way that you can, like what was creating this different perspective people got when they took the mushrooms? Why was mushrooms doing that to them?
So I went to see a talk that was done by Dr. David Luke. He's an associate professor at Greenwich University, and they're mapping the mind on what happens to the brain in psilocybin. He done a great experiment because there was about 200 of us in the room, and what he done was he said, right, here's what to do, everybody be quiet, this is what your brain's like on psilocybin. I'll give you the pictures and you can post them up. And he says, this is what your neurons are like in your brain. He says, so imagine that you've got a cell, imagine you've got a space, and there's one neuron over there, and there's one neuron over there. So he gets one guy on the left to shout across to the guy on the right, and they're shouting back and forward. So like we can hear there's a noise, but it's not entirely clear. Like you can make out that somebody's shouting, but it's weak and not clear, and it's not very apparent. So he says, this is what your brain's like when you take psilocybin. He says, what I want you to do is just turn and just speak, don't shout, just speak to the person on your right. So you just hear this rumble in activity. It just ramped up massively. And he pulls up the graph, and it's a circle, and it shows you the neurons on the singular, and then these massive amounts of neurons and all the pathways connecting on psilocybin. And this is what's happening to people is that when they're told and siloed, they get into a degree of things that they just feel helpless, they feel hopeless. You know, and things will happen where they just go, you know, is this it? What's the point? I just feel like I go out, I work, I pay bills. Like, Is this all that there is to life? And then you do that long enough, what happens is you become disconnected. You don't recognize the beauty in nature, or the moments with your kids, or that moment with your wife, or that euphoric time with your friends, because you're not in the state of mind. Your mindset's not there. So you do that, you let that go for long enough, and then you become what people would call depressed. And that depression is really just a disconnection from life experience. And what happens is it's like falling down a slidey slope. And then when people take psilocybin, especially the MAP study at the John Hopkins University study, where they done assisted psychedelic treatment, which is where they were giving patients a dose of psilocybin and were assisting them through the trip. What they were doing was they were measuring people's they were measuring people's state of mind before, and then measuring it after using questionnaires. So they would establish if there was any change, and then they would do that over numerous people to try and establish a baseline for what was really going on. And what they found blew their mind was that people that had habitually had problems for years and sometimes decades, sometimes depression that was chronic and wouldn't just, no matter what they tried in terms of antidepressants, just wouldn't budge, or addicts that had, just couldn't get out the bit. Even people with terminal diseases that knew they were going to die, they measured how their response to how they felt about dying. And what they realised through this psychedelic assisted therapy was that people were reconnecting. That was the overall premise. Obviously, we could go into the nuance of each different one, but what was happening was people were feeling reconnected. They were remembering the beauty of life. And this is what was happening on these psychedelics. The psychedelics were showing them to reconnect those neurons back in. And it was like all these loose connectors were going dunk, and the psilocybin was making that happen during the trip. And that was what they found. And this is what, when you take proper science and you measure it properly, and you allow the interaction with the spiritual, because we're spiritual beings, we're physical beings, we're mental beings. So we've got 3 planes of existence. And it seems that when you ignore the spiritual and you shut that out and it's not part of your life, and you let go of the mental, or you don't take care of it, or you let it rot, or you let it go to ruin, then it will show up in the physical in your life, and it's grim. And then what was happening was, in the psilocybin assisted treatment, is that it was going straight through the mental problem, right to the spiritual, and plugging them all back in. And even people that had the terminal diseases, and they said, look, you're going to die. Like, you will die. And they had people that were terrified of death. Like, their anxiety and stress around death was measurable beyond order. And they were going into these, they says, look, we want to try this. Like, here's what we want to do. Here's what we found in the other studies. Would you like to take part? And there's a guy on the Gaia series there's a Gaia series called Psychedelica. And there's a American black gentleman who comes on, and he tells you what it was like before. They explained to him, right, here's what we want to do. And the guy's going to die. He's got stage 4 cancer. He's like, the train's about to terminate. And he's like, you really, really petrified to death. And he came out after two treatments. He's like, it's all going to be okay. And you can just see with his body language how he's coming across.
Crazy.
He's completely changed. And you look at some of the stuff that's been on. What sparked my interest was Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan had Dr. Rick Strassman on. Dr. Rick Strassman was the one of the first doctors to get an FDA-approved DMT study in America post-war on drugs. So he managed to get approval for the experiments of using DMT. And Strassman writes this book that, not just observing it blowing his mind, is nothing short of amazing, because you go, oh wow. And it just shows, he tells the story of how they went into the FDA approved studies, that he had a preconceived idea of what was going on when people were having these trips or hallucinations, and he believed that they were just fragments of their imaginations, just amplifications of whatever was in their mind. And it goes on that he has this medical model that we can explain what's going on. And there was 60 67 participants that took part in the study, and when it all fell down, where he says, look, we don't have medical models to explain this, is these people were going into the experiment, they were going into the treatment room, they don't know each other, and they were going and having the DMT experience and coming back, and they were recounting interactions that they'd had on the trip that matched the other participants. So it was like they were going to a spiritual place, on the spiritual plane, and interacting with beings, but none of them knew each other. Strassman said that was when I did not know what was going on, and he tried to minimize it down. It's just an hallucination, and it's just this, and it's just that. He says, with the regularity and the information and specific information, there was no way that our medical models could explain this. What he said was, this DMT is a chemical gateway to a spiritual realm that we don't understand.
See how they open up neural pathways in your brain, like mushrooms, for example. See if you were to like perform a given activity or do whatever when you're on mushrooms, do you think that could like dramatically improve your ability to do that given thing? Like, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? Try to say.
Well, it's been something, so microdosing has been something that's been popular in Silicon Valley for a number of years now, and remember, it's about order of like degree. So think of, you want to turn that fan down?
Fucking goosebumps for the last hour. I know. Because that's what a lot of people might think, if it's like talking about reconnecting and stuff like that. Is it like, what is it reconnecting? Do you know what I mean? Because it's everyone's life is very different, so they might be watching this thinking like, what does he mean by reconnect? Like what can I reconnect? Do you know what I mean? Is it going to be, do you know what I mean?
You ever felt disconnected?
What, me? Yeah.
Or you ever spoke to anybody that's disconnected?
Oh yeah, completely.
What are they disconnected from?
Fucking reality and their purpose, their potential, their perspective. They're not got the right perspective. They're disconnected from fucking logic. Do you know what I mean? So
how do you know?
I don't know, because obviously I have a baseline of morals and perspective that I base off of logic and sources of information that I've used, and I can just look at them and analyze them and go, they're disconnected.
You look at someone and they come and say something to you like, you know, what's the point in life? I don't know why I'm doing it. You say, like, when was the last time you were at nature?
Bro, it's so quiet with that fan off, man. I can't like it.
Why are you, like, how did you get here? They'll say, I don't know. You say, you always felt like that? Like, you always felt disconnected? Like, you always felt, what's the point in life? Like, no. Like, so you came out the womb and you just thought, this is shite.
What was the point?
Like, and you go, well, no, like, this is an NLP technique. So when you do neuro-linguistic programming, what you do is you recount back to, you have a problem, you keep going back until you find out where the problem started. So you go like, how long you felt like this? And it's not they came out the womb and they hated life. At some point along the line, they disconnected from something. Something happened, someone died, relationship didn't work out, they, you know, got lazy, whatever the method, whatever it was, caused a problem. And that problem they didn't deal with it. So mentally they were either weak, or their mindset was in the wrong place, or they're around the wrong people, or they got in with the wrong crowd, whatever it may be. And they end up going, well, I don't feel like, as I said, you leave it long enough, then, you know, you let it rot. Their mindset is in a hole. And then they're so disconnected from their spirit of who they are, because they'd spirit before, and they were mentally strong before, and they loved life before, but now their spirit, they're disconnected from their spirit, because they're like, what's the point in this? And then mentally they're so weak and so messed up, they're all knotted up. And then physically you can see them and they're like, you know, overweight or like a bag of shit, or they're like grey, they just don't look healthy. And, you know, as we discussed, they're probably looking for escape. And that escape is usually in stuff where they're looking for a fix or a buzz or some sort of, something that feels good. And oftentimes that's usually quite detrimental, especially if you're feeling like that often and you want to escape often, then you then form bad habits, which can lead to addictions, problems, or issues. And you look, it's easy to see that, and that's what happens is when you try and go, look, right, how did you get here? And they don't even know, because they're not even aware.
See, just to speak about like the effects that mushrooms have had on me personally and people that I've known, right? Obviously, when you're talking about being disconnected, I think that's a really good way to put it. But the way that I see mushrooms is it kind of kills your ego, so your ego isn't really there. And how it's been explained to me is your ego's created through trauma happening. That creates a cut. The ego creates a scar to protect you. So you're controlled by your ego, you're limited, all these things, right? And then when you take mushrooms, you don't have the ego. Like the ego is almost broken down. You don't have it controlling your perspective and how you view yourself, how you view life. Would you say that's an accurate kind of way to put how mushrooms can affect your perspective?
Well, I think what you need to understand about mushrooms and the relationship with your ego, right, is your ego likes control, right? Your ego likes sure things.
What is your ego? Can you actually explain before you answer what is your ego?
See, your ego is a mental construct of what you think you are. And it's there to make sure that you uphold that image so that you know who you are, what you're about, you'll defend yourself if someone's trying to attack you. This ego is something that exists within you that's a construct of who you believe that you are, and that it drives you to things that you want to be more of, and it causes you to defend things that are maybe an attack on that mental image of who you are. So we all have ego. An ego is not a bad thing, right? An ego running out of control is a bad thing, but ego can also be a great thing. So ego can drive you forward. It can motivate you. If you're embarrassed about where you came from, ego can drive you towards greater things. If your ego is like, what would be the other side of that? If you believe that, you are entitled to stuff because you had a shit life, then your ego would defend that, and that would be a detriment to you because you'd just be in the victimhood category. So ego is this sort of double-edged sword that when used well, it's extremely powerful, and when let to run ragged, it can be extremely detrimental. The thing with ego predominantly is that it's a control mechanism. It's there to control. It's there to make sure you keep in control of everything that's going on. I'll control what people say about me, what they think, how I see myself, how I carry myself, and so on. One of the things that you'll find with anyone that is doing or thinking about taking a psychedelic journey of any kind and have done any morsel of research will understand the importance of setting. So you need to set your mind to understand that you're about to have an experience. And one of the things that you need to do with that experience is be able to let go. You need to accept that you need to disengage your ego or you're going to have a rough time. Lots of people have had bad trips, and the majority of bad trips is they want to control the trip. And I'm afraid it's like having a PlayStation controller. You've just passed the control pad to someone else. Like you've passed that control pad to the mushroom gods, and they're going to play the game, regardless of whether you like it or not. They're going to show you whatever they want to show you. And if you have ego, you're going to have a rough ride. You can still have an ego, but you need to know that you're giving over control. And with that opens you up and primes you for an experience that's profound. And that's what Wasson was explaining when he went to see Maria down in Mexico. That's what numerous people that have studied ayahuasca or been to ayahuasca retreats, and lots of people like Dennis and Terence McKenna, famous brothers that had put psilocybin and all things psychedelic on the map with their lectures and books that they've written. So they're talking about a profound experience if you're ready to let go. But part of that process is setting the intent that you are going to go into this and hand over control. And it's not necessarily that it disengages your ego as such. I think you need to disengage your ego or it's going to be a rough ride. That's why people have such a traumatic time having, if you hear the experience of bad trips, I think that's a lot of what comes of it. If you hear people that describe a bad trip, it's usually, I didn't like what was going on and I wanted it to stop and I wanted to be in control of it and I wouldn't go where I wanted. That's ego talking.
So
that's ego telling you, hey, look, that's not working.
So you say, like, Kyle, why we can have a good trip is because we can accept letting go of our ego. We have the humility to do it. The way though that I experience ego, for example, a direct example would be I was avoiding doing this one thing when I took mushrooms. So when I wasn't on mushrooms, I'd be like justifying it. This is why I can't do it. It's because of this. It's because of that. When I took mushrooms, it was I'm not doing this because of the fear of what people think. Or like it would be an easy, like it would be a really eye opening, like zero like protection approach to like understanding why I'm not doing the thing. Like
what was the thing? Like, why would it make you look bad?
it would be like posting on Instagram, for example. This was like a good 18 months, 2 years ago.
You fucking go right over that, didn't you?
I fucking right over it. But I think it was generally, I had about 6 posts on Instagram, hadn't fucking posted, and I was like, what do I post? And obviously knowing that each post doesn't really mean a fucking thing, you can just post all the time and people forget whatever. It was the ego of what people think, what do I post, what do I want people to see? And then when I took mushrooms, I was like, fucking, it doesn't really fucking matter. But the reason why I'm not posting is because I care what other people think. And then it allowed me to go, fucking hell, I don't actually really care what other people think. And then I started posting. So like that's in my opinion where like shrooms has came in and fucked my ego off. I've not intentionally went, I've got no ego, I'm going to let shrooms control this. It was just when I was on mushrooms, my perspective was a lot more zoomed out, subjective, no emotions.
Think of psychedelics, like you ever heard the phrase mirror, mirror on the wall?
Yeah.
Who's the fairest of them all? Like, well, mirror, like psychedelics is like a mirror.
Yeah, that's exactly what
and it goes like that.
But it's a clear
like,
mirror.
Have a look. What do you think?
Yeah.
And you look at yourself and you go, I see it now from that perspective. You shift your perspective because you're now not just looking at it from the inside and insular. You're looking at it from the outside, like the reflection in the mirror. The psychedelic mirror is going, I think you like. What do you think? Do you still think the same? Because mushrooms are pleasant. I mean, it's not like DMT or ayahuasca. There's different. Mushrooms are a very pleasant way of having a softer or more easier ride to get to that perspective. Like if you look at some of the people that have experienced ayahuasca is called the vine of the souls or the vine of the dead, and the reason that they do 4 trips in the Peru or the South American countries is usually the first one is it's to show you what you don't want. The second one is to allow that to heal, and the third one is to show the progress, and the fourth one is to show you the great and the good. So it's a 4-stage process, and a lot of people, if they have that, if they have a lot of stuff that they don't want to see, it can be rough doing that.
Yeah.
Psilocybin seems to be much more gentle at that.
Where do you do these retreats? Did you say Peru?
There's lots of retreats in South America where they can go to the Amazon and take part in these ceremonies.
Like people like us can.
Yeah. They're in Spain as well.
When are we going then?
Should we book a trip?
There's ayahuasca a trip to north of Scotland though, as well.
I'm gonna go for a piss.
You're better doing it in South America, mate. You're better doing it in South America for sure. Yeah, but as Geo said there,
unloads his bladder.
Yeah, but as Geo said there, because we're still rolling, the reflection that psychedelics mushrooms holds up, it's a reflection that has no ego attached to it. So when you're looking at yourself, there's no justification, there's no blaming other people, there's no egotistical bullshit, there's no protection. It's full fucking, the torch has been shined on you. You can look at yourself with no blaming other people. It's just all you. Mushrooms allow you to realise the things that actually matter and the things that you actually appreciate, because whenever I've taken mushrooms, like, as much as a retard as you might feel when you actually go on a trip of mushrooms, you're like, oh, this is so nice, this is so amazing. It does just start to make you realise how simple life is, or how simple life has to be to actually just be something that you can appreciate so much. And when you have that pure simplistic way of seeing the world, the little things that once annoyed you won't annoy you anymore. The Wi-Fi being too slow, fucking X cutting in front of you, fucking X whatever the fuck. It's crazy that taking mushrooms gives you such a more kind of tamed way of like receiving stress in your life. It's fucking mental. Like, mushrooms are something that everyone needs to at least try. And it's just annoying though, because see the stigma around mushrooms of how people are so far away from taking it based on what they think it is, that they'll never even open themselves up to trying it and potentially improving the quality of their lives forever. People think when you take mushrooms, the ground's gonna fall away from behind you, and you're gonna be running away from the ground for fucking a full day straight. But in reality, as Gio's just mentioned there, you can really you can definitely regulate the dose you take of mushrooms as well. And if you take a lot, expect a fucking crazy experience. If you're taking a little bit of mushrooms, it's not gonna give you this fucking scary experience that you need to fucking run away from that everyone describes. They all describe a fucking crazy. They seen a tree turn into a fucking dinosaur and chase them. It's just
I
that
know.
doesn't really exist in real life when you take mushrooms. Would you agree with that as well? There's a lot of what Jack just said there. The stigma behind mushrooms is I don't want to take it in case fucking shit just goes fucking mental. There's trees chasing me. People make those kind of things up from. Because have you ever taken mushrooms and fucking things start chasing you and turn into creatures and fucking? It doesn't exist. I don't think that's actually a fucking real thing.
I mean, one of the things that Andrew Huberman discusses it at length. I mean, Andrew Huberman's professor neuroscience, so he's very well attuned to what's going on in the mind, and he says that one of the things that they did in the screening process of the psilocybin assisted therapy is that if you had psychotic episodes, it would rule you out. So if you had to one degree where someone in your family had psychotic episodes, it would rule it out. And it was mainly because it's the unknown part that they don't really know yet. That is someone just sort of getting that worked up that they feel difficult letting go. And what I would suggest to anyone, not that I'm advising or recommending anybody rush out and do this, but if they are considering it, then it's something that they want to do in stages. So do not go out and go balls deep into a huge mushroom trip. Like start with something where, a very, very mild dose, and then build up to so that you can become accustomed or familiar with the experience, rather than, going out and trying to do a hero dose, because it's a heroic dose is for someone that's experienced with trips can be profound and deep, but it can also, if you have a lot of trauma or you have a lot of issues, it can be a rough ride. So you do it with that in mind. But the lower end of dosages isn't going to have that same effect of higher dosages. It's a bit like a dimmer switch. So you can turn it on, you can just get a little bit through, and you can turn the dimmer switch up until you can get it to fucking full blast, which is the really, really high doses. And you can have somewhere in between. And what you want to do is become acclimatized to what's going on, so that you can get familiar and you can get comfortable and you can get used to letting go, so that you can get to the point where you go, right, okay, I'm ready. And it's one of those things that I said this before. It's like if you imagine that this is a chemical gateway to get to a spiritual entrance or a spiritual world, and these entities or beings or whatever it is that's there that they've described in the DMT spirit molecule. Imagine that you're there and you're sort of like the orchestrator of this. And it's one thing if like you've got someone there that's taken their time and gradually done it and got in the right frame of mind and set their intentions, and they're in the right setting and they're in the right place and they've done the work, and they come to this, the doorway, if you like, the spiritual doorway, and you're going to be like, yeah, this is really good. You're treating this with respect and you're doing it in the right way, in the right manner, versus like Davey at a house party getting out his fucking tits. That's, got a concoction of drugs into him, and he's just decided to do 8 grams of mushrooms, and he's blew his fucking brains out. Like imagine he comes to your door, you're not going to go like, you're going to scare him off. You're going to be like, don't come and do this. Yep. Like you don't know what you're dealing with, and you think that you're Billy Big Balls, like taking these powerful psychedelics, and that you're expecting a great ride 3 days into a bender. Like, sorry, Davey, but that's not how it works. And you can see why people might, if there is, I don't know if there's an adjudicator or anything, but I would understand that, like, hey, it seems to be that people that have these benders and have these sort of experiences, usually the message is, stop doing this to yourself. Like, a lot of them have had great experiences, but I would imagine that it's not the right way to go about it.
No, so it's all about how you set the intention. And when
massively.
you're saying about microdosing as well, right? And you're allowing your brain to become more familiar with the feeling. Well, when you take mushrooms, you're probably more angled towards like love, peace. Like there's less feelings of fucking anger and fear, especially in my experiences with mushrooms. And when you're like firing these cells of peace, love in your brain, you're wiring these together, and that's why microdosing mushrooms is a powerful thing, because you can start to train your brain to be more, will have more pathways in it to do with peace and love, and not be the fucking person you are when you're sober and anxious and fearful and full of doubt. So. But see, yeah, Gio, you said to us, like, you showed us 3 things of how you set the intention, and it was like...
So there you go, there's the pictures there. So on the left is your brain, the placebo, and on the right is your neural connections on psilocybin.
Yeah, and just so much fucking more in it.
So that's the activity that's going on in your brain and the neural connections. So psilocybin creates neurogenesis, which is the creations of new neurons. It promotes and encourages that. And it not only encourages it, but encourages the strengthening of the connection between those neurons. And that's why people are having deeply profound experiences when done well, and done properly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Are the experiences, like, is there intention set throughout the experiences? Is there, like, think these specific, because obviously the thoughts you feed your brain and the pathways that wire together, are they, in these experiences, like, intentionally thinking about different positive things, or is it how are they having a positive experience, if that makes sense? Like, surely they're not just sitting taking mushrooms and seeing what comes up.
No, the work's done beforehand. So, if you want a positive experience, you've got to set that intent prior to it. And not so much are you having a positive experience, but more is your intent good? Like, why are you doing this? Are you doing it because you want to find out more about reconnecting to the world? Do you want to improve your how you operate? Are you wanting to realize the beauty of this sort of existence that we have, or are you doing it because you want a buzz, or you want it to get out your box, or you want to see weird trippy things? And it's like, you see a lot of people, like, I don't know anyone. Even in Rick Strassman, there was a guy that had Rick Strassman's book, the DMT, the spirit molecule. There was a guy that had a fairly intense and what you would classify as bad trip, Rick was like, I don't know how we're going to, how are we there for him type thing. How do we sort of handle this? And the guy was like, rough trip, and like Strassman had called him a couple of days, and the guy was like, it was exactly what I needed, because it gave him the information he needed, even though it was a bad trip.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And I don't know. I don't imagine how that came about. I don't know what the guy was doing in his life, because I can't square his trip with how that would have been good for him. But it seemed to work. It seemed to click. It's these things that if you want to give yourself the best chance of having the right intent, the right trip, set the intent and do the work. So things like, see if you can't meditate, don't bother taking a trip. See if you can't set an intention, don't do a trip. See if you can't take 5 minutes and think about what you really, really want. Forget it. Like, you're playing with fire here. Like, if you can't get there, you've got to do the work beforehand. You need to be ready for something. It's not a packet of here's profoundness. You've got to do the work to receive the profoundness. If you're not ready to do that work, don't bother.
Because see, for me, mushrooms, I feel like, is about realizations and fucking gaining perspective, and like maybe reinforcing perspective. And an actual real life example that happened to me a couple months ago. I was up at my auntie's doing a little bit of, like, she does like the bookkeeping and stuff for me, and my little brother came up because he was just part of like what we're doing for the business and stuff. He's employed under me. So I asked him a question. I took basically previous to that, earlier that morning, I took fucking mushrooms. I think I remember saying, just fucking didn't even wait. I just scranned some. I was like, fuck it, we'll take some mushrooms today. And I already have that kind of like predisposed thought of gaining perspective, realizations, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's subconscious for me to for things to trigger when I'm on mushrooms to like realize. So I was up doing the accounts and stuff, and I asked my brother Jude a question, and I expected him to reply with something, but the reply he gave was just so, in my head, just so fucking stupid and retarded. Like, I was going to call him, oh, what a fucking retard you are. But because I was on mushrooms, I had this weird third-party reaction to it, and I realised what I was about to say to him was due to my expectations that I had put on him. So the realisation I had in that moment was not to, like, basically, well, the disappointment I would have felt was due to my expectations that I had put on to him. Whereas you can't really, basically the realization was to not expect anything from anyone and not to put your expectations on other people or hold other people to your standards, because everyone's on their own kind of level, their own kind of plane of existence. So yeah, it's crazy that mushrooms like allowed me to realize that. And if I was sober, I would have just called him a fucking retard. But being on those mushrooms allowed me to realize why I was about to call him a fucking retard. And I had that weird third party kind of experience where I made the realization of I can't put my expectations on people, because I'll either just be let down or treat them in a negative way that they don't really deserve, because it's my expectations that let me down to then react to them, as opposed to, like, they're innocent. They're just fucking they're just replying with what they thought was the right thing to say. Do you know what I mean? So it's quite cool that mushrooms, I feel like, is a big thing and reinforcing and finding new perspective and realizing things. Do you know what I mean?
Do you think that will solve the requirement for HR and companies around the world, just if everybody's
full of mushies? 100%. Do you not think as well? Do you not think it would dramatically improve a lot of fucking things if a lot of people just tried with the intention to realize things and gain more perspective?
I think overall that's what we need. We need that. I'm not sure everybody's ready for a mushroom experience though.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like I think everybody's capable of being much fitter and stronger, but I wouldn't put them under a 180 kilo bench press to start them off. And that's a bit like what a high mushroom trip would be like. You can build up to it and you can work up to it. And you can prime yourself and you can do the work like doing the training, but I'm not sure the answer's like, let's just, go out there and hose everybody down with it. But that said, is that the ideal, that if people get more experience or more perspective, or, they're able to subordinate their ego? Yeah, I think that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that we should aim for, because it's something that people could do a lot more of these days.
But I feel like I wouldn't have had that realization if I hadn't already cemented into my brain that mushrooms allowed me to do that. So it does go back
really
to
the mushrooms
intention.
that cemented it, or was mushrooms just amplifying what was already there?
Exactly. So I think the mushrooms gave me the opportunity to have that realization amplified enough to trigger the learning experience from it. Do you know what I mean?
So did the power come from within you and the mushrooms reminded you, or do you think that the power came from the mushrooms?
I feel like the power came from within me, and the mushrooms was the gateway to that power.
Just a nudge?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like the mushrooms opened up my brain enough to tap into the deeper, the power of like my mind almost. Yeah, I feel like mushrooms are like that. I feel like mushrooms
they expose you, man. They definitely do.
But they amplify I would say, the potential you have in your brain already. Like, it's not, you don't just take mushrooms and turn into a smart cunt. Like, I'm already pretty intellectual, pretty switched on for my age and just in general. Like, I have conversations with 40, 50-year-olds and they're like, what? Like, they just fucking don't even realize what I'm saying. They don't even understand what I'm saying. So, I don't know, you kind of have, I feel like you do need to have some sort of like predisposed levels of awareness, but there's ways you can go about increasing those levels of awareness as well.
So we've kind of said like two personal experiences, how kind of mushrooms have allowed us to get rid of our ego, look at it from a different perspective. What's something that you've experienced that's been like, if I wasn't on mushrooms, or that's allowed me to do that? If it's like acting in a different way or changing your perspective.
What's a realization that you've had that you could fucking pass on to the viewers?
There is much, much more going on than we think. Much more. And that's not a flippant comment or a bypassing the personal experience, but I think that the story about your brother and you is really particular to you. And I think that your experience on how, you were getting in your own way, it's really particular to you. It might not strike a chord with everybody out there, but if I was to say what's my experience being on mushrooms, is that whatever that particular thing is that is in your way, or you're doing, or it's getting in the road, there is way, way more going on out there that you can tap into should you do the work. And mushrooms can be a useful tool to do that if done in the right way. And that's, you know, I could go into my own experiences, but this is what I mean is that there would be, that's the right message for me, and it's not going to be the right message for you. Just like you've had two totally different experiences. It's not been like, you know, a one size fits all.
No.
Like the message that you had was very different from the message that you had.
Yeah.
Yours was like how you seen yourself, and it was getting in your own way, and that you were worrying too much about other people's thoughts, and that was prohibiting you from taking the next step to develop yourself. That's really different from what you say is going to land and hurt people, and that you're too quick at reacting, and that might leave a bad situation with your brother. And then this, you've intercepted that by using these mushrooms to go, well, I can do it a better way.
Yeah.
Two totally different experiences, but both as powerful. Both helped you improve, build better relationships. And that's the thing about mushrooms is that they're, when done well, they show you something that there's way more out there than this narrow tunnel way that you view things.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what you said is like, you just like, you're a fucking retard. This is what you've done. And it's just really narrow. And now you've opened up your perspective. Your one was, you know, I've not posted and, you know, everybody's going to think this. And it's went and opened them up. So there's way more going on, and it opens up your perspective. And whatever that is for you is right for you.
Yeah.
If you're prepared to have a look. And as I said, most people that try and keep the narrow view, their ego gets locked in or get a rough ride.
Yeah.
And they will get a rough ride because they're trying to, it's like the forces are trying to open it up.
Yeah.
And they're trying to fucking hold it together. And it's like,
crazy.
You're not going to defeat this. Like, you've bought the ticket and you're going to take the ride, and the ride will be done when it's done. It's like somebody going on a roller coaster and deciding fucking, you know, 30 seconds in that they don't like it and they want off. I'm like, no, this thing goes to the end of the ride, and that's, you know, you might as well enjoy the ride. Like, there's no point in you whining, bitching, pissing, moaning. This is going to the end of the station.
Yeah.
So
to back up as well, like the reason why, because that was a particular like context that I had spoke about my brother, but the principle of like expecting nothing, like from people and not putting your expectations on others, is like a fucking principle that I apply to every situation in my life now. So like the cool thing about mushrooms is it doesn't matter how particular or specific that realization is. It could be a general concept or principle that you can then carry with you forever. And the more realizations you have on mushrooms, the wiser you fucking get. The broader your perspective is, the more control over you have over your thoughts and your fucking actions. It's fucking mental.
I remember having like, if you want a personal experience of mine, is I remember like one of the biggest things that I drive is the power of your mindset. It's one of the things that you can influence and you're in control of and you're in charge of. And when I had a psychedelic trip, it showed me a boat that was on the sea, an old wooden sailboat, the ones with the kind of the huge sails and the big wooden wheel to steer the rudder. And what it was showing me was this is your mind. So this sea is your mind, your mindset, and the boat where you directed it was going to direct you to your results. And off to the right was the cliffs and the rocks that you could destroy your boat on. Now, those cliffs represented, you know, drugs, debauchery, bad decisions, negativity, just the things that you'd want to steer clear of. And up ahead was there was a storm brewing. See the clouds and the storm and the thunder and lightning. So choosing that road would have been, you know, it's going to be volatile, and it's rough seas ahead. And off to the left was, you know, calm, beautiful seas and sunshine, and a treasure island. And what it was saying to me is that you are in control of your thoughts, and you can direct them wherever you want to go, on just like on the sea. But if you want to do it, you must grab this wheel. Otherwise, the sea will just push you wherever it wants you to go. And that is people's experience with their lives. Because how many people go, oh, it was this, or I'm not in control, or I'm not in charge. Yep. And you go, well, it's just the same as them sitting on the boat, letting this fucking boat go wherever it wants to go.
Yep.
And meanwhile, there's a huge wheel in front of them, a gigantic wheel that can control the direction, and they're too busy going, I'm a victim, I'm entitled, oh, I can't do it, I don't have the time. That one fucking cracks me up. See people go, I've not got the time. It sends me round the fucking twist. It rubs me up the wrong way all the time. You know, I'll do a video at 4 a.m. and I'll do another video, you know, at fucking midnight. You know, and you get people that will sit and send me like, they'll sit and send me like, you know, YouTube links or fucking Zoopla links or just links to stuff. You know, so you know that they're active and you know that they're sitting on their phone and they'll go, you know, I've not got time for training. Or they'll sit and say, go, well, you know, I'm flat out busy, I've not got time to go and research this or do X, Y, Z. But they'll sit, you know, you go on their Instagram and, you know, they're at a coffee shop or out for dinner or laddie dan it up or out in the hot tub and, you know, like, hey, it's like, well, you know, you're bullshitting yourself because what you're saying to yourself is in the mindset, is in your ship, is, oh, I can't do this and I need to limit it because of X, Y, Z. And I'm looking at the wheel going, no, I'm afraid you're not steering the wheel. You're just letting the ship go where it wants to go. And you're listening to your own bullshit. You are listening to your own bullshit and you don't even know it's bullshit. You know why you don't like you don't think it's bullshit? Because you like the fucking sound of it.
Yeah.
Right? And just because you like the sound of it doesn't make it true. Right? Because the other perspective, as in us, can go, nah. And that's the power of it, is you get to see it for yourself.
Yeah. I don't have time typically, just derives from having the wrong fucking priorities, isn't it?
But see,
just not fucking prioritising the right things.
You saying that there, but the experience you had was you have control of your own thoughts. It's quite similar to me in terms of when I was on shrooms, I was like, well, I could actually just post. Like, I have control over doing the thing. But when I'm not on mushrooms or when I wasn't, I was letting other things control it. So, like, the mushrooms giving you the you're in control also gave me the same kind of perspective, whereas it was like, fucking hell, mate, you're not doing it because of other people, but you actually could just do it. And it's mental because the experience you had about the ship and when else would you just sit? You wouldn't sit with a fucking coffee or sober-headed thinking that kind of shit. I think the mindset...
It's closest to a dream. That's what it's
so
like.
the perspective or the headspace you get into taking mushrooms alone is fucking really, really powerful. Like, you wouldn't sit...
I mean, I've had experiences with like long meditations or breath work that have got similar results. So, you know, a lot of people maybe are a bit chicken-hearted about, you know, I don't know if psychedelics are right for me, and that's fine. But there's many routes to the same place. So, you know, if you want to do, you know, a 45-minute at probably the shortest to a few hours breath work, you can get similar experiences, but you need to put in the work. And if you're brave enough or you're comfortable enough to let go, then psychedelics is worth considering. But temper that with, right, the breath work. If you don't like it, you can come out pretty quick. You know, there's no eject button on psychedelics, so you know, just be mindful of that. Where if breath work, meditation, you can pop out.
stop.
So, like, if you are chicken-hearted, then there is other routes to get that deep, profound understanding. But you just got to be mindful of, you know, how much work it takes to get there. Because it does take concentration and focus and quieting your mind down and setting that intent. You know, you need to have the intention to do it. Intention's super strong. A lot of people don't realise the power of it. They can certainly. It's funny because see if you got them to look at their intent of all their flaws, they can back themselves up to the cows come home. You know, it's because I'm short-tempered, or I've got this, or I'm tired, or I'm lazy, or I'm inconsistent, or whatever. Fill in the blank. And, you know, you're like, I don't know how you can't see this. But they just love the sound of it. Any reason, justified, whatever bullshit, because it sounds good. And it's like they've just put themselves in a submission hold. They've literally locked themselves up. Yeah. Just like what happened to you. Oh, I can't post because if I do, people will think X. You just put yourself in a submission hold. And it's like psychedelics, what are you doing? Yeah. You're like, it's a fucking good question, actually. What am I doing? Yeah. And you unravel yourself. You unlock yourself.
Because when you've got a belief, you find anything you can to support it. So if I was to ask you, look around right now, find things that are red, you'd probably like point out things that aren't even red to support the fact that you were trying to find things that are red. So another thing I think psychedelics or mushrooms do as well, they kind of make you question your own beliefs, and then you've got to kind of different way to look at it rather than just being, as you said, in a fucking chokehold with the current belief system that you actually have. It's fucking powerful shit.
That's a class way to probably end this podcast.
Good.
Oh, fucking literally next episode, I want to talk about the Amazon rainforest. I think that's crazy. And obviously, DMT is a big. Is it ayahuasca or DMT? Yeah, DMT, the two plants out of all the hundreds of thousands of plants like that combine to without one, like. Do you know what I mean? The two plants. Do you know what I'm talking
So,
about? Nah.
just so that you're primed to the next episode and haven't been left on a fucking cliffhanger there.
Yeah.
Ayahuasca is a brew,
Yeah.
right, that contains a vine and leaves that contain DMT. So dimethyltryptamine is DMT. Dimethyltryptamine is in nearly every living organism. We have exogenous DMT. Sorry, not exogenous. Is it exogenous? We create DMT within us. So in our pineal gland can produce DMT. So DMT is in lots and lots of biological mass, including ourselves. When you want to make ayahuasca is a brew that is orally active, so it means that you can drink it. And the reason that it's mixed as a brew is that there's biocarbonates that are in the mixture of this brew between the vine and the leaves that shut off your monoamino oxidase inhibitors in your stomach, so that it stops you destroying the DMT, and that makes it orally active, meaning that you can ingest it. Because normally if you took it without the monoamino oxidates, you would essentially destroy the DMT and it would be rapidly metabolized in your body. So the MAO inhibitors that the part of this brew allow it to be drank. DMT is typically smoked, or the Strassman injected it because he had pure DMT. But DMT is within the leaves that are in the brew of ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is a much longer trip than DMT. DMT is called the businessman's trip. It's usually 10 to 15 minutes long, highly intense. Ayahuasca is a deeply spiritual and profound one that can go anywhere from 4 hours up to 6 or 8 hours at the long duration. So the interesting thing with Western science is, and this was probably a good place to conclude, when they went to the Amazon and they found that these tribes and shamans were mixing this vine with these leaves, the first thing they says was, how did you find out to mix that vine with those leaves? And they says, well, the gods told us. And there's 80,000 different species of plants and vines down there. And the Western scientists were like, how the fuck did they figure this out?
Yeah.
And they said, well, the gods told us how to do it.
Yeah, there we go.
Stopped them in their tracks.
There we go. We'll dig into that next episode. Fucking class. Thanks a lot for coming on again, Geo. Probably 2 weeks' time we'll have the next episode. But yeah, perfect. Class.